Welcome, independent researchers, skeptics, and all of humankind, to Shadow Citizen. Shadow Citizen will explore the shadows of an alternate reality. Your hosts, Rachael L. McIntosh.
Heck yeah. All right. We're back, gang. It's another week. I'm Rachael L. McIntosh. I'm the host of Shadow Citizen. But we're having issues right now with our Skype. We're trying to get our guest on, who I'm really excited to talk with, and I'm sure everybody that's on listening live with us right now is excited to hear from too. It's Adam Kokesh. I heard Adam Kokesh give a speech, I want to say in 2007 or 8. It was at the Freedom March, and it was such a moving speech. It was incredible. It was like 90 degrees outside. All these Ron Paul people were in Washington, D.C., standing in front of the Capitol, and he delivered the speech, and it just made me cry. It talked about just everything you wanted to hear at that point, that it wasn't just about freedom and how it was important to just love freedom. And then he gave the speech again at the Ron Paul's political training that he had. And I was at that too, and it was really good, and people stood up and they were clapping. And I found out just the other day, after I spoke with another guest, it was literally the same day that I spoke to another guest, that he was running for president of the United States in 2020. I was like, oh my gosh, this guy's been all over the place. He's been doing a lot of different things since that time in 2007. And when he gets on the phone with us, he can tell us about it. He was doing a lot of things to raise awareness. I know that he ran for some sort of political office. He'll tell us about that experience. But I know he did things like an open carry situation. Oh, good. I guess he's on the line with us right now. So, Adam, are
Hello,
you
Rachel.
Yeah.
Yes, I am. Thank you so much. Hey, I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to make you cry. That wasn't the point of that.
It was so good. It was so good, Adam. It just made me burst out. On top of it, I hadn't slept in like 24 hours because we did the Ronvoy down to the thing, and all I had eaten was chicken teriyaki and, hadn't slept. So it was an incredible speech, and it was great. And since that time, I've been a big fan of you. And I was really excited to hear that you're running for president. So if you start off where you want to start off. Do you want to start off back then? We've got 2 hours. You could tell us your whole life story.
Well, we only have an hour, actually. We're on our way right now from somewhere in northern Maryland into Baltimore on the Taxation Theft Tour. And this is part of the lead up to 2020. I'm getting ready to run on the platform of dissolving the entire federal government. So when we say Kokesh for not president, saying that I'm not running for president or running for not president specifically, or really rather running against the presidency itself, it's really much more accurate to talk about what we're doing. But to sum it up, I'm coming to a bankruptcy and doing the entire thing in a peaceful, orderly manner, returning some agencies as independent institutions.
Okay. Well, I think whatever you just said was probably really important, but it was all jumbled up. Your cell phone's cutting in and out. But the gist of it is that you're going to basically dismantle the federal government.
Right. Well, the problem is that, we live in a third world country known as the United Soviet States of America, where we have communications cartels, and unlike in a lot of more developed countries, cell phone service, even as close to a major city, is pretty rich.
All right, so I could hear that one.
All right. Well, it should be getting better as we get closer to the city here.
Okay, so now you're going to run with the Libertarian Party, or is this outside of the party?
Absolutely, with the party. We're organizing right now. We are recruiting delegates on this tour, and for the reforms that the party needs to stop being a debate club and become the political force that it should be in 2018 at the National Convention. And one of the most important things is that we want to introduce decentralization or localization of government into the National Party platform. And specifically to say that it's preferable to have governing decisions made on the local level as close to the community and the individual as possible, rather than by a central authority. Even if communities are going to make wrong decisions every now and then, it's much better than trying to squeeze everybody into the one-size-fits-all solution. And it's basically the everybody gets what they want strategy. When you get government down to the community level, it's a lot more responsive. So if you want government to do something in your community, you can have that if you find a community of like-minded people. And you don't force that on anybody else. Other communities can organize how they see fit. We also want to make sure that we have a statement of unity in the party in 2018. So it's not just about bringing together the splinter groups within the Libertarian movement, but to say that if you believe in localization, if you want government decentralized, it doesn't matter if you're a conservative or a liberal or a moderate, whatever, you can hold on to your aesthetic preferences for politics or for how communities should be organized, as long as you embrace the core ethical mission of the Libertarian Party.
Okay. All right. The general overview for everybody listening to the show, would this be more like the Articles of Confederation? No,
it would be, well, see, one of the things is that, one of the important benefits of this is that when you have 50 independent states, the Olympics will be that much more competitive. So you have to end up with 50 independent states, completely independent. And if they end up forming collectives after we've completed this process, that's possible, but that wouldn't be my job. That wouldn't be within my authority. So specifically to take us through this one course of localizing government by dissolving the federal government, the end result of that would be that 50 states and the territories and the district are independent governments at that point. So there will be some agencies that continue to exist. I know some people are going to criticize me and call me a statist for this, for wanting to create potentially a perpetual government agency, but I think it would be certainly understandable as an independent thing. One of the benefits is we get to release all the documents. All of the secrets come out, all of the records, all of the patents, and there are lots of things that the government, or our government, especially the federal government of the United States, does in secret that are horrific, and we only find out decades later. So we want to release all of those records, but we have to do so in a way where we redact private personal information that shouldn't be made public. So there will be probably an endowment for the Library of Congress to handle those records in perpetuity, or at least as long as they're relevant. The Department of Veterans Affairs, for example, needs to be spun off. I say privatized, although a lot of people don't like that word. But what we're talking about here is putting resources in the hands of people who have an actual interest in them. So in the case of the VA, we have over 20 veterans committing suicide every day in this country. If we take the VA, give it an endowment, spin it off as a private institution, and give every single veteran in America one ownership voting share, I guarantee you're not going to have 20 veteran suicide today. So there are some agencies that will continue like that. For example, Social Security. When we're done liquidating the federal government, we're going to fund Social Security until the money runs out. We want to pay back the creditors who the federal government has stolen from when we go through this bankruptcy process. And we're not talking about foreign banks. We're not talking about foreign governments. We're talking about the American people. And I can't promise exactly how much it's going to be, but that's what we're doing with the stolen funds. When we liquidate the federal government, they go to paying back the people as fairly as we possibly can do it. And so in that sense, you will have these American government vestigial agencies that carry on. And if you wanted to call that the agency of confederation, I mean, hypothetically, yes, the 50 states, or rather the veterans of the 50 states or the Social Security account holders of the 50 states would still be connected by those institutions, but there would be no central governing authority of the federal government.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Okay, so you had mentioned bankruptcy. So you see bankruptcy in the future for America?
Well, I think it's been the American federal government really, I mean, it's kind of like, is the mafia bankrupt or not? If it steals for everything it owns, does it ever legitimately own property in the first place? I would say it's been bankrupt from really the beginning. when the Articles of Confederation were usurped by those who signed the Constitution to create a stronger central authority. But as an actual corporate entity that it is now, it's clearly bankrupt. I mean, if you look at the debt-to-asset ratio, if you look at the cash flow of the federal government, no, there's no way that any sane business person would look at that and say, yeah, that's a good solvent business. So right. In a sense, we're just declaring bankruptcy as in a state that already exists. We are deciding we are giving up on this institution. We are no longer going to allow it to continue in this fiscally irresponsible, insolvent state. And the message is basically, hey, let's do this the easy way rather than the hard way. The hard way is burying your head in the sand, pretending that we don't have a problem, and then hoping that government spares you in its violent death throes as it desperately clings to power. But the easy way is to apply a solution as big as the problem. And I think the American people, from this tour, from going out and talking to people, I mean, even just over the last few years, I think overall the American people who don't vote especially are looking for a reason to come out and vote, but they need a legitimate reason, not someone who's just going to give them more of the same. And more or less, I mean, I think for those who even care enough to analyze it at that level, they're ready to admit that the Constitution is a failed experiment, if you accept the, Amero Fantasyland story of why it was instituted in the first place. But of course, you know better. You know that the Constitution is a wonderfully successful experiment at creating a strong central authority that can rip off more people than any government has in the history of humanity.
Okay, so now that sounds like, let me see. Now, did you say this at something called the Aspen Conference recently?
Right, the Nexus Conference in Aspen. It was a really amazing event, and
tell me about that. Because I was talking to Catherine Austin Fitz about that, and she heard you talking, and she got scared. Not scared like she was in danger or anything, but she was like, "Wait a second, this sounds a lot like something called the Rape of Russia," and that was Ann Williamson. She gave a testimony before the Banking and Financial Services, the U.S. House, in 1999, where she talked about basically how the CIA went in there, and it was called the Rape of Russia. They went in and just crashed the the Russian government, and then all these private businesses came in, which of course the CIA is the business intelligence unit of the United States government. Right. And she talked about that and how literally millions and millions of people actually died because immediately when they did that to Russia, people's life savings were worth nothing, and they only could hang on for like a couple weeks, and then they had to sell all of their assets just to feed themselves. And she was very concerned that this might happen to us if what you were talking about were to happen.
Well, we're talking about really the opposite. We're talking about, dissolving the CIA. The CIA will no longer exist after this executive order is signed, or at least it'll be a custodial agency and will have no authority. It'll have no ability to carry out such horrendous missions anymore. And I think getting rid of the systems of coercion is the most important thing to stopping those kinds of, economic manipulations on the largest scale. But Catherine, when she came and interrupted my speech, I mean, she was really upset. She wasn't, in control of herself the way she was speaking, and it was kind of disturbing. I don't know what she, if she was, there for some other nefarious purpose, or if she just really misunderstood what I'm talking about here. But I think the premise of her objection, and it might be that she has a somewhat different worldview, is that the American federal constitutional government today somehow prevents manipulation of markets and currencies and is a force for good in the world of keeping things decentralized. And if that's the case, I think that's a very historically inaccurate worldview. And if anything, we've seen that the existence of the federal government has always served to concentrate power in the hands of the few. And while it is possible that in what I'm advocating there will be a period of upheaval, I think with the kind of timeline we're talking about doing this over, with the kind of warning that people will have, even if they're completely unprepared when we vote in November. We won't be signing the executive order until taking off in January, obviously. So there will be nearly 2 months, you'll have 2 months notice to prepare even for, and you will know exactly what is coming because it will be laid out in that executive order. So while, she might be correct to point out that there are some potential negative side effects of doing this, and I think the negative side effects are mostly for the people who benefit from the federal government. I'm not gonna lose sleep over a bunch of IRS agents losing their jobs. Sorry if that causes, if you're gonna complain about that unemployment, you know what? Yeah, totally guilty as charged here. But we know that economically speaking, government jobs are incredibly inefficient. For every government job we eliminate, we free up the resources to create at least 3 more jobs that are nonviolent jobs, because the violent government jobs always entail a huge amount of inefficiency compared to the cooperative, peaceful market solutions to those problems. So, it's possible. I think in the age of the internet especially, and, Catherine was at a cryptocurrency conference. Nexus is one of the really exciting new up-and-coming cryptocurrencies. I made a good bet on that, buying it when it was 4 cents each. They're worth about $3 each now. So I think when we have these alternative economic models, the idea of staying on the old model because it's got some temptation of stability or getting away from it might create some instability, is saying like, I can't quit heroin because I might be going through some withdrawal. It's kind of a silly argument.
Okay. Now, when I spoke to you the other night, you were talking a lot about Bitcoin, about a cryptocurrency. And like you just said, you were at a conference talking about cryptocurrency. Talk about how you envision American money being when you are the non-president.
Oh, well, I don't, but I can answer the question of what the process is to switch from what we have now, which is a global fiat currency system that is a currency that is forced on us at gunpoint, that we don't have an option to opt out of, except now with cryptocurrency we do, although paying taxes, you're still forced to use the U.S. dollar, obviously. So the question is asked, how would I end the Federal Reserve System? And I know this might sound like a shock to a lot of people, but I don't actually want to end the Fed myself directly, because I don't think I would have that authority even in this executive order as president for the purpose of dissolving the federal government. The Federal Reserve is often referred to as a private institution. And some people will argue with that. There's a little subjectivity in that. But it's a private-public partnership, right, where you have a private bank that has certain monopoly privileges thanks to the enforcement of the U.S. government. So if you remove that violent backing from the Federal Reserve System, it's subject to market forces. The answer to the question, how soon should the U.S. get off of the U.S. dollar, is let the market decide. So if I come in and I'm saying, hey, we're dissolving the federal government, it's a bankrupt institution, I can't say, hey, and therefore every American, you have to stop using the U.S. dollar. All I can say is you are now free to use competition. And the Federal Reserve, I can only predict, and this is really the most important thing about what millions of people coming together peacefully will create as a monetary system. I can make predictions based on market trends. I can make predictions based on technology trends. I can make predictions based on my preferences or other people's preferences and the way that those are going to change over time. But I'm not going to be a central player. That's the point, is that we want to let people figure these things out without violence involved. So I'm not going to present a plan that is. So I imagine that if the Federal Reserve is still functional, if the dollar is even a functional currency at this point, if it hasn't been significantly shaken by cryptocurrency and sent into its inflationary death spiral at that point, then we're going to see a pretty orderly shift as people get away from the dollar and shift over to cryptocurrency. And unlike every single other currency shift that's happened in human history, this one can happen with a device that every American can have in their pocket, and most of us already do right now. A smartphone is enough to have a practical monetary system that serves the people instead of the banks.
Okay, so if everybody's going to be, you're not dictating this happening, but if everybody is to be walking around with a smartphone and that's how we're going to be doing our money, wouldn't protection of the U.S. infrastructure be really, really important, namely that internet works, that electricity works, and shouldn't we have something to, some sort of national thing to support that? Because otherwise, why would
it be national?
Well, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So I'm sorry. I got cut off there. Please go ahead. Hello.
I'm missing half of what you said. My whole point is.
Okay. So don't we need something of a national defense to protect the infrastructure for the electronics or the monetary system? Is that your question?
Yes, that's the question.
Okay. Well, I think absolutely, except that it wouldn't really be, on a national scale. It would be on a voluntary scale. So, one of the big problems with telecoms today is that they're all navigating various government regulations from country to country and dealing with various, monopoly, oligopoly type policies like we have in the United States with the telecom companies that have, an oligopoly over service, and it's impossible to really compete with them. And that's why service sucks so many places. And internet sucks, and you don't have choices in who you get your service from. So those companies would then be able to provide security that's appropriate to securing those networks. And I think that's absolutely critical.
Okay. Because the way I can envision this happening just horribly, that certain cities, like say Washington, D.C., or certain cities have awesome communications, and then other parts don't, and therefore they're penalized for not having the internet, and they're penalized for not having the access that these other communities have.
Wait, who would penalize them?
Well, they wouldn't have the ability to trade.
Why not?
So they'd have to move somewhere where there was this sort of communication.
Why wouldn't they have the ability to trade?
Because of the internet.
How does the internet stop them from trading?
It's not stopping them from trading. I'm saying, what if these people are in an area that it doesn't have coverage because it's been left to a private organization or to a private family or to a private, community to really put their money into the infrastructure?
Well, okay, so your question is based on this assertion that private businesses don't want to serve people and create service inequalities?
No, that's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is there's, say you really are into cryptocurrency, so you're going to go somewhere where you can do your trading and, buying and selling. But what if there's somebody who's an American citizen currently, who lives somewhere where he can't? So you'd say, all right, he's going to use the dollar, but as in your own mind, the dollar is going to spiral down and not be worth anything. So that person is forced to move.
Hold on, I think there's some incorrect premise in your question here. I can use my phone anywhere on Earth, literally now. Where is it that people are being deprived from getting access to the internet right now?
So do you think it was probably a good idea that Obama gave everybody a free phone? Well,
I think it's good that we're capable of that, but I don't think it's good that government did that, no.
Yeah. See, that's the thing. What you're talking about makes me think like people have to accept this technology, which is freely available in America.
Of course not. Yeah, you would absolutely have the choice to opt out. The only force here that exists is when government actually threatens people with violence for not complying with their policy or for trying to compete with one of their favored businesses.
Right.
So we're talking about removing the force entirely.
Okay. Now, there are other people that have tried, like you were telling me about Bitcoin Jesus the other night, Roger Ver.
Yeah, great guy.
Yeah, he's looking to start a libertarian utopia somewhere else in another part of the world, and he's not going to offer up his country. It's not going to be an ICO. When ICO, for people that are listening, that's like a coin, like big. How do I explain this? If you're starting a cryptocurrency, you offer, like, instead of an initial public offering for a stock, it's initial like crypto offering, and you offer the. So he's not offering it as a coin. Now, would you, if you were the non-president, would you envision the American machine that it is, even though you're separating down into states, each state or community, could they offer their own ICO?
Well, I wouldn't be in any position to stop them, certainly. I don't see a problem with that. Although I imagine just how evil, corrupt, and destructive, and how much the federal government has been holding back America, that I don't think they're going to be turning to state governments to solve problems. They're going to be turning to themselves. They're going to be turning to...
Uh-oh, we're losing you. Uh-oh. Oh, Adam, we're losing you.
Well, we're coming into Baltimore now.
Yay! Hopefully we'll kick in. It will kick in.
So hypothetically, yes, a state could issue its own cryptocurrency, but why would anybody use it when you have non-state cryptocurrencies? You have peaceful cryptocurrencies. Why would you go to the cryptocurrencies that are tied to a state's violent monopoly?
I see what you're saying. I smell what you're stepping in, Adam. Okay, so now, all right, now, Peter Thiel, as you are well aware of, he's very into libertarian stuff. He went over to the Republican Party in this last election. He was very into
the Trump supporter.
What's that? Say that again?
Yeah, he ended up backing Trump. I was very disappointed to see that.
Yeah, what was your thought about that? Why do you think he did that?
Well, I think there are a lot of people, and I don't know Peter Thiel personally. I'm not familiar with his philosophy. I've just listened to a few interviews with him and that sort of thing. So I don't want to speak too much on his behalf. But I think that there are a lot of people who call themselves libertarian who don't understand what that word means. And that's fine. A lot of libertarians resent that. I think that's a great thing. Although it is a little weird when Sean Hannity refers to himself as libertarian leaning. You go, yeah, okay, Sean, whatever. You definitely don't know what that word means. But I think a lot of people just think that libertarian means freedom-oriented or freedom direction. And I'm okay with people using the word that way. I think that's great. But obviously that's not the same as understanding the beautiful, simple philosophy that is libertarianism based on self-ownership, voluntarism, the non-aggression principle, which makes it more an ethical philosophy rather than a political philosophy. Actually, if you apply libertarianism as an ethical philosophy to politics, you realize that it's not a political message at all. It's the anti-political message. So I would wager from my understanding of Peter Thiel that he's just more of a freedom-leaning person or a freedom-oriented person or someone who appreciates freedom rather than a libertarian. And if he calls himself libertarian, that's great. Let's be inclusive with it. And when someone like that sees Gary Johnson versus Donald Trump, I hate to say it, but because Gary Johnson is also not a libertarian, it's very tempting for them to say, well, we can't go with Hillary, we have to go with Trump. And I think that represents a really dangerous victimization to the propaganda of elections, which is that you have to choose from the lesser of two evils. And when that's the case, it really shouldn't matter. And if we keep falling for that gambit, then we're always going to end up voting for evil, and the system will continue to get worse. And if we just accept that, yeah, maybe we elect... Maybe, and I don't think this is true, but maybe Hillary Clinton is, in her policy and as president, going to be significantly more evil than Donald Trump. Okay, so you're going to vote for Trump so we avoid Clinton, but then you're condemning us to 5 more election cycles of voting for the lesser evil, whereas if you had supported Gary Johnson, even if you didn't like him, knowing that he's still far more freedom-oriented than either Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton, at least you'd be making an investment of the future of the party and the message and making real change. And I think every prediction that I've made in that sense around Donald Trump has come true. Everybody who supported him has been very disappointed, and I told them that was exactly what was going to happen.
All right. So that's cool. Now, what I was going to ask was, you did run for an office previously. I remember you standing next to a picture of you standing next to Ron Paul. Were you a Republican when you did that?
Yeah, well, I was a libertarian first, and at the time I was still a lifetime member of the Libertarian Party. And Ron Paul endorsed me, and said that he would only endorse me if I ran as a Republican and help with his general libertarian insurgency into the Republican Party strategy, which I think since then we've seen to be of limited potential.
Interesting. Okay. Good. Very diplomatic way to say that. So he wanted you in there to help him with a libertarian insurgency within the Republican Party. Excellent. All right. So there's another question I have about Ron Paul. How did you get that gig? Did he hear your speech at the Freedom March? Like, how did you get the gig at the Freedom March?
Well, for the Freedom March in 2008, that was being organized by grassroots supporters, not the campaign, fortunately, because a lot of the people in the campaign were the Jesse Benton types, and they didn't want anything that was really challenging militarism, which is unfortunate. And by the way, that's really the most important part of this platform, that we are challenging the essence of militarism itself, going back to the advice of our founders, who understood that a standing army was anti-freedom and that we were better off with the militia defense. So at the time, I was very active with Iraq Veterans Against the War, and the organizers of the rally wanted to have someone representing the anti-war side of Ron Paul's message. So I was selected for that. And Ron Paul was there when I gave the speech, and then I was invited to speak at his event in Minneapolis, or St. Paul, rather. I think it was right across the river for the Minneapolis RNC in 2008. And from there were a lot of people who were just like, all right, Adam, what are you stepping up for next? And it was kind of and Ron Paul wanted me to run as a Republican, so that was the strategy I pursued.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Okay, so listen to me. Did you, since that time, you've done a lot of different kind of, I don't know, dancing things at the Washington, where were you, like, and you got arrested, and then you did the open carry thing, you got arrested. How did you avoid being in, I mean, you were in jail, obviously, but how did you get out of jail? Like, did you swing a deal with somebody? What was the thing that got you out of jail?
Well,
because
I did
a normal person would be like, they'd be in jail, they'd be stuck. They'd just have to. So how did you do it?
Well, I actually had a really good time when I was in jail. I thought it was a wonderful government-induced, taxpayer-funded spiritual retreat, and I spent a lot of time meditating and reading and working on my yoga, and that's actually how I started writing the book, Freedom. So I've been arrested over 36 times in the course of my activism. And most of them are really petty, cite and release, or, you getting arrested for protesting, and then they give you a ticket and let you go, or you do it overnight, you go to court the next day and they let you go. But I did 2 stretches that were at least weekends. I've done a handful of weekends. And one was in Philadelphia for not smoking a joint in front of Independence Hall as part of the Smoke Down Prohibition rally. They arrested me while I had the microphone in my hand and pulled me away so fast that the cord ripped out of the microphone. And I don't want to go give you the whole story here, but basically, federal officer bumped into me from behind while he was going to arrest someone else. And because he bumped into me, I was charged with assaulting a federal officer. And that was a felony, but there was tons of video footage. So when they tried to give me a deal for being out on pretrial release, I told them to shove it, and they let me out a week later. In the case of the shotgun incident, I was denied bail in the course of that and ended up doing 4 months while basically being bullied into a corner. They threw some other charges at me. And see, once they can deny you bail, it makes it really easy for them to mess with you, which is, by the way, why I have so much admiration for the Bundy family descendants who are in federal facilities in Nevada right now awaiting retrials, because they were denied bail and they have been held despite having an unsuccessful trial. Even they were, I think most of them ended up with hung juries. There have been some who have been convicted and some that have been exonerated and released. There's been a lot of stuff going on with that. But the Ryan Ammon and Cliven Bundy are still in jail right now. So in my case, you could say that I tapped out after 4 months, and they kind of bullied me into a corner, made it clear that I wasn't going to be able to pursue the legal strategy where I was going to be able to press the Second Amendment issue. And so after 4 months, I took a plea deal and I got out, and I was on probation for 2 years and had to wear an ankle bracelet for 6 months.
Oh, wow. Okay. You had a ankle bracelet. Okay. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. So you did a plea deal. What did you have to do for that?
I had to plead guilty to a felony.
Okay. And then they said, all right, you're under arrest. Here's an ankle bracelet and you can go home and just hang out for a while. And that was that?
Well, it was a lot more complicated than that. But yeah, basically it was, if you plead to this felony, we'll give you time served plus 2 years probation. And I just told the judge, hey, I travel for work a lot. I have to be able to travel for work. And so, there was a lot of back and forth. I had a probation officer who tried to set me up, and I recorded him on video and got him in a lot of trouble, which was fun. And, so they said, well, if you're going to travel, we're going to put an ankle bracelet on you. So I had to wear an ankle bracelet for the last 6 months of my probation.
Oh, wow. All right. I'm sorry to hear that. Now, the next thing, I was going through I went online and I looked for Adam Kokesh, and I got to your Wikipedia page, and it says that you went to an elite boarding school in Pebble Beach. Did you really?
Yeah, I guess you could call it that. Robert Louis Stevenson in Pebble Beach. I was there for a year, and I really didn't like it, mainly because the social environment was so stratified, like rich kids versus not quite as rich kids.
It is an elite boarding school. So
yeah, it was. It's funny. I've never heard it described as elite. But I think that would apply. I mean, it's a good school. They get kids into Ivy Leagues, and I didn't like it. I didn't like the environment. I didn't like the attitude. So I went to the other boarding school that I got into that had horses, and so I was able to do horseback riding and team penning and rodeo sports and polo cross and stuff like that. And and then I got kicked out. I got kicked out of that school. A year and a little bit in, and then ended up doing my last 2 years of high school at the Native American prep school in Rowe, New Mexico, where I was the only white student to attend that school ever because they shut down a year after I graduated. Graduating class of 15 students. Wow.
Okay, so...
Yeah, so I had a really fun, interesting high school experience.
I should say so. Now, I'm just going to ask, what's your family like? Are your parents very wealthy that they thought to send you to boarding school? Or is it just, why was that a thing, do you think?
Well, my parents got divorced when I was 10, and it was a way for me to get away from doing 1 week with one and then 1 week with the other. So gotcha. I really appreciated it for that. My dad actually recently won a huge Supreme Court case, 9-0. Kokesh versus the SEC decided in favor of Kokesh. And he used to have a venture capital firm and was doing pretty well for himself, was able to, send all of his kids to school. And so I definitely benefited from that. But the government has been screwing with him for the last 17 years now, holding his case over his head that he finally beat. And had to take it all the way to the Supreme Court case. So, I grew up pretty well to do. We were in a nice neighborhood in California, in the Bay Area. And yeah, my parents were able to do that. Although since then, my dad has been destitute, and it's been really sad to see that the government screwed with him for so long, and he had to go this far to win this victory. But I've had a lot of money to get by to feed his younger kids. I have 3 half siblings from his second marriage who are all awesome. It's, the 5 of us now are Adam, Andrew, Alex, Alden, and Audrey. And my dad has a big white Suburban with the license plate that says A-Team on it. So now you know where I got my really corny sense of humor.
Oh, wow. Well, thank you for sharing that. I didn't know that. Now, why don't you tell us more about this book, Freedom? Because I know you were cruising around the country and you had the Freedom Wagon and you were cruising around and you have this book you've been passing out. I've got 3 copies of it right now in my house.
Awesome.
So, yeah, it is awesome. Tell us, you said you were in jail and this is what made you start writing this book. Tell us about that.
Well, yeah, thank you for the opportunity, for the great plug here. It was while I was in jail for that 4-month stint that people were sending me all the great libertarian manifestos. And I used to have the list of names I could roll off the top of my head real quick, but, Rothbard, Mises, Hayek, Spooner, Konkin, Ruert, Rand, I know I'm forgetting so many great ones, but all of these great manifestos that came from Bastiat, I'm just going to keep going. All of these great books that were sent to me while I was in jail were the inspiration for this, because one of the things I realized, having traveled the country as much as I have, and I like to brag about one thing, and that is that having asked more people than anybody else how they woke up to freedom, I think I have the best body of anecdotal data. And I wish I'd written down every single answer I got to that question. Maybe I should start doing that. I should start writing that down and keeping a record. But what I got from that very clearly, and I think this squares with most people's observations, is that people don't wake up from being argued with. They don't even wake up in conversation. I've never heard someone say, when I asked them, how did you wake up? Well, there was this guy yelling at me in a bar, and, he just turned up the volume loud enough, I was able to realize that he was right about everything. And then I decided, okay, I'll be a libertarian. Obviously, that's not what happens. It happens in quiet contemplation. It happens when you're able to adjust your own worldview without any, peer pressure or external influences. And so a lot of times people will say, and this is the best feedback for me, is that it was Adam's YouTube channel that woke me up, that they spent, a weekend or a week just going through my videos until they were able to absorb the perspective and the philosophy. But for a lot of people, and myself included, it was a book. It was Ethics of Liberty by Murray Rothbard that really was the final piece of the puzzle for me, when I could say, okay, I get it now. I'm a libertarian, and I understand what that means. So what I did is, with all of these great books, with all of their strengths and weaknesses, I decided that I would become the greatest rip-off artist the freedom movement has ever known. And I would take all of their strengths and none of their weaknesses and put them into one ultimate red pill book, the ultimate conversion tool. So it's 100 pages. It's in short sections, 1 to 2 pages each. It's irrefutable logic, straightforward, easy to understand, easy language, no really big words, and it's something that you can give to someone else with the absolute confidence that you can stand behind it, because I had a lot of help writing this book. I set out to write the ultimate red pill, and because I was able to tap into my fan base and my supporters and crowdfund the editing, we succeeded. And I say this with all humility, that right now, if you had to give someone one book and you wanted them to wake up to the reality of government, this would be the book you'd want to give them. It's not the silver bullet. It's not the be-all, end-all. It's not going to end the state by itself. But right now, for expanding this movement into the demographics who are ready to hear this message, I think it is an absolutely critical tool. And I would say the market has backed up my assertion, because we have over 2 million downloads now. The book is in its 4th printing, 50,000 copies in circulation. So it's been a big success so far, and enough people who believe in the message have donated because of it, that we're able to travel the country like this and give books away for free everywhere we go.
That's cool. All right. Now, speaking of donated, now, as far as your non-president campaign goes, you're taking donations, and you're taking in cryptocurrency, American U.S. dollars?
Technically, we're not raising any funds for the presidential campaign or not campaign right now, because we're not filing FEC paperwork yet. So we're doing this legally. We will be filing FEC paperwork in January for an exploratory committee, and at that point we will. Right now, people are able to donate to our 501c3 nonprofit. So the only money that's being spent on the not presidential campaign is coming out of my personal funds, and we're making it very clear that there's that financial separation. But we take tax-deductible contributions of any amount. At thefreedomline.com, you can click on donate, and it'll take you to the website for the 501c3 nonprofit.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Now, so you don't have the real campaign. It's not official yet. You're talking about it, and it'd be in 2020, but you're serious.
Right.
You're serious.
Yes. We are building towards this. We are building the organization. Most importantly, we are building the groundwork, the network, the delegate organization to come in and reform the Libertarian Party, and that's really the first step. So you could say that right now, legally speaking, we're in the pre-exploratory phase, and we will be entering the exploratory phase formally in January, and most likely announcing Independence Day 2019.
Okay. Now, for people at home that want to look at, you have a website for this. What is the website?
Well, the main one is thefreedomline.com, and from that you can find where I'm posting videos, find all my social media stuff, where I'm blogging and everything, and that'll take you from there if you look at the menu to Kokesh4notpresident.com. But it's way easier to remember how to spell The Freedom Line than my last name, unfortunately. So if people want to go straight to that, Kokesh4notpresident.com, but the easier website is thefreedomline.com.
Okay. All right, the Freedom Line. I'll put that up under the YouTube stuff. And for everybody listening at home, and you know this too, that this is going to be sent out via YouTube, Vimeo, BitChute, Steemit, and iTunes.
Yep.
So
heck yeah, you're on it.
That's right.
I love it. That's the way. That's the way you got to. We got to start. Practicing what we preach. You want to challenge social media monopolies. You can't just be hanging out on Facebook all day. You at least got to have. There's so many alternatives now. I'm a big fan of Steemit and DTube. That's kind of what I'm focused on. But yeah, Rachel, you're really on top of that. I think that's so important.
Oh, thanks. Got my finger on the pulse over here,
yep.
Shadow Citizen.
I used to be much more focused on media production when I was doing Adam versus the Man. And
what happened to that? What happened to that, by the way? Why did that? I'm sorry to cut you off, but why did that go away?
No, don't worry. That's exactly what I want to talk about, because it really is an important shift in the consciousness that's happening around this. But you've heard now of the adpocalypse on YouTube and how so many creators have been affected by that and their revenue cut. Well, it happened to me in 2013. I was doing 2 million views a month. I was making $6,000 off of that, and I was hiring people, and then suddenly my revenue got cut by 2/3, and I had to let people go, and it was very frustrating. And since then, it's just been downhill with YouTube. As they were bought by Google and have screwed a lot of people over with. It's hard to say. Yes, it's all private property, but in a corporatist environment, obviously there are other factors here. So I can't, be too harsh on YouTube. They've done a lot really to advance humanity, but they're no longer the really open source, free speech kind of platform that they used to be. It's much more controlled, much more corporate and advertiser driven. And that's, part of the evolution of the internet, but it also means that the more important evolution towards decentralized, blockchain-based, really ownership by the people type social network, that's just going to happen that much faster. And like you mentioned, BitChute, that's another great example. And I'm looking into that right now. But Steemit, S-T-E-M-I-T, if people want to check that out, Steemit.com. And they just added a video feature recently called DTube. So there's that as well. And it's really important that we make the shift. Although I can't really complain, even though I'm not in the full production. Like when I was doing Adam versus the Man, I killed Adam versus the Man after I wrote Freedom, because I wanted to do something that was more in line with the message rather than versus being confrontational. I wanted it to be about, what we're doing, which is peace and love and creating a more productive, harmonious society. So, I haven't been that involved with media as my focus, and so I've been focused on the book and activism and organizing for this campaign. So it's just great to see that already we have this viable platform of Steemit where I'm making more money on Steemit than I was on YouTube, even though I was on YouTube for, 5 or 6 years before I had the following and the subscription base to be able to do what I did. Just being on Steemit for a few months, boom, I'm already making more money, and I'm way happier on a platform that I trust, that is censorship-free, that is controlled by people who value the potential of the internet rather than the people who own Google, who care about getting people like Hillary Clinton elected.
Now, bringing it back to the non-presidential campaign or exploratory, but what would happen if everything got privatized? If that happened, wouldn't it make it so that huge corporations could basically dominate anything anyway?
Well, if they did, it would have to be peacefully and by consent, whereas today corporations are able to dominate things with the help of the violence of government, and that's why they're able to become abusive as they are. When they're directly accountable to the people, to the customers, that kind of abuse isn't really possible. So I think getting rid of the violence enables that kind of equalization that we would see, that would get us away from the systems of concentrated power we live under today.
Okay, interesting. All right. Now, another thing I was going to bring up. If you would be the president of it'd still be the United States of America when you became president, the non-president, and then you would dismantle the federal government, and then not you personally, because you're not going to be a dictator. You have to have Congress behind you.
Well, no, we would be disbanding Congress immediately. But in terms of having a team, yes, we would have a team of custodians, and instead of a cabinet, it would be an active cabinet. Like I said, I'm not appointing a secretary for an agency. I'm appointing a custodian for every agency who's going to carry out this more or less preordained process that's laid out in the executive order.
Okay, so the people that have been elected and are in government, they're going to oppose you. Are you ready for this? Of course, if you get this position. Or is this more just like to spread the idea, like how Ron Paul kept saying, it's not about me winning the presidency, it's about spreading the idea?
No, we are running to win. We are going to be ready to win in 2020, although I understand this may take several election cycles before we build the overwhelming consensus through the American public that's going to be necessary to carry this out. It's been amazing just traveling the country to see how much this message has inspired people, because we already have a legal team and a policy team working on this executive order that would lay it out in detail, so it's absolutely clear what the American people are voting for when they go to vote for this. So,
okay.
The challenge of dissolving the agencies, like what is the process for each one, all of that's laid out in advance, and I would be overseeing this process as the custodian, but the only power that I would have would be really to supervise the custodians of the agencies, or nominate someone else if they're not doing their job. But the question really is, is it constitutional, right? And the answer is heck no. Of course it's not constitutional. What we are doing here is invoking the higher authority of the Declaration of Independence, which says that we as a people have the duty and the right to alter and abolish systems of government that do not serve us. This is clearly a government that is not serving the American people. So for someone to stand up and say you can't do that when we have the overwhelming support of the American people for the specific plan, they're not going to be able to oppose this.
All right, Adam, thank you so much. We've got music coming up. It sounds like the music's coming up for us and we've got to say goodbye. But thank you so much for being with us. And so everybody hang on to the next hour. I'll be back. But Adam Kokesh, thank you. Have a great night.
Rachel, thank you so much for the opportunity. Greatly appreciate it.